Greetings all. I'm Nell Escher, and I'll be presenting our paper, Hexing Twitter, Channeling Ancient Magic to Bind Mechanisms of Extraction, which was prepared in collaboration with Nikola Banovic. Now, charting our path together across these next few minutes. Firstly, I will identify our foe, extractive surveillance capitalist platforms, and the stories that spin support for these systems, such as the digital addiction narrative. I'll then turn to existing strategies for unsettling extractive relations, such as magic and forms of resistance. Next, I'll present our intervention, which draws on Greek myth to sabotage a platform extraction mechanism. And finally, we will expand to a broader call to reorient interventions to contest platforms rather than viewing them as inevitable configurations. Between surveillance capitalist platform and user, there's an imbalance of power. The priorities of the platform are imposed upon the system, and narratives are used to naturalize this arrangement. The current design of social media platforms is normalized, even though the extractive imperatives of profit generation are prioritized over human flourishing. Take the case of doom scrolling, a term popularized in the pandemic to describe the irrepressible helplessness many felt as they passively flicked through a never-ending stream of depressing news. The digital addiction narrative of social media use blames the individual user for such behavior as doom scrolling, pathologizing their behavior on the platform and attributing it to an individual defect, lack of self-control. This narrative gives rise to interventions that attempt to reform the user who fails to withstand temptation, restraining them from indulging their base impulses, tying them to the mast like the hero Odysseus so that they don't go diving off the boat in pursuit of digital sirens. But unlike the strong ropes that constrained Odysseus, the bounds placed by digital self-control tools are often very easy to bypass. They present a single decision point where the user can either practice self-restraint or cave into temptation. Framing the user as deficient, addicted, leads to digital self-control tools that aim to reform the user, giving us apps that say, "Hey babe, instead of doom scrolling, have you tried drinking water for 15 minutes?" But this framing ignores the role of the platform in creating problems. Surveillance capitalist firms intentionally select design features that maximize use of the platform to extract more of that valuable behavioral data. Doom scrolling behavior would never be possible without the platform's infinite scroll feature. As soon as the user consumes tweets, new ones are loaded and filled in their place so that the user can guzzle content endlessly. So we suggest a new orientation. Instead of blaming the user, take aim at the platforms, not the people. Moving into the lore. Some strategies exist to contest the power of platforms. Forms of everyday resistance that allow a dominated class to develop and prioritize its own set of norms and values. There are practices to dodge moderation on platforms, such as typing the word lesbian with a $sign in the place of the S to get around TikTok moderation filters. There are technical tools that users can install, like the demetricator, which strips away numbers of notifications, numbers of likes from different social media platforms. Or you can taunt the CEO, disputing his claims to authority. So while addiction narratives of social media use naturalize and support extractive platforms, resistance practices refuse to follow the existing scripts about how things should work and who should have power, contesting extractive platforms. So in trying to conjure new resistance practices, we turn to magic as inspiration. It has long been used as a tool of insubordination and has been feared by dominant classes, as magic suggests that you can get what you want from rituals rather than work, which undermines labor discipline and the rationalized pursuit of gain. Magic has this generative power, which can be used to imagine and enforce new kinds of relations. For our intervention, we drew upon the magic practice of Homeric invocation, which uses verses from the Greek poet Homer as incantations. Particular passages are chosen because of a correspondence between actions depicted and desired outcome. We aim to curse the infinite scroll feature, which leads to doom scrolling, by using a Homeric story about a cursed Trojan prince. An ancient Greek myth tells of the life of a prince named Tithonus. He would often go out to the fields to practice his lyre in the early hours of the day. One morning, Eos, goddess of the dawn, glanced down from her seat in the sky and instantly fell in love with him. She came down to him and pursued him and loved him. There was but one dark cloud that shaded their joy. He was mortal and she was not. Eos couldn't bear to think of a life where he grew old and died while she stayed fair and rosy forever. So she appealed to Zeus, the king of the gods, and asked that Tithonus be granted eternal life. Zeus consented and fulfilled her wish. She sped back to Tithonus with the news, and for a time they were happy. But as the years passed, gray threaded his hair. Wrinkles creased his handsome face. While time did not touch the pure and shining Eos, Tithonus faded before her eyes. She returned to the home of the gods and sought an audience with Zeus. What was happening to Tithonus? Had Zeus not granted him eternal life? "I did as you wished," said Zeus. "You asked for eternal life, not eternal youth." Eos despaired. How wrongly she had worded her request. Though she no longer delighted in his caresses, Eos kept Tithonus in her luxurious palace, dressing him in fine clothing and feeding him with ambrosia. All traces of his youthful beauty faded. He grew unsteady and required constant care. It came to pass that withered Tithonus was so feeble that he could hardly move, and his speech shriveled to a thin, dusty rattle. He pleaded for the return of his mortality, an end to this decay and suffering, yet there was no way to revoke the gift from Zeus. Eos could endure this no longer, and in her besieged heart formed a plan. Tears fell from her eyes as she locked him away in a dark room, his cries stifled by the great doors. She never looked upon him again. Our casting takes the idea of infinite life, but not infinite youth, and maps it onto the infinite scroll mechanism. Our intervention takes form in a browser extension, which allows us to interfere with the visual appearance of the platform while keeping all processing within the user's browser and collecting zero behavioral data on our end. We represent digital content as if it were subject to material decay, blotting out some of the letters or obstructing them with diacritical marks using JavaScript, fading and blurring images with CSS filters, and we intensify the rate of decay each time Infinite Scroll loads a new set of tweets. We map the stages of the myth onto the platform intervention, reenacting the liturgy of the myth and moving the user through each stage, where they are cast in the role of the goddess and the platform in the role of the accursed. At first, the user and the platform join together, the tweets fresh and unmarred. Infatuation. As the reader scrolls down their feed, wrinkles appear. Glitchy text appears here and there, enough to arouse notice. As more tweets are consumed, letters are whited out, so the user must work to fill in gaps in the deteriorating tweets, provide care. The ravages of time escalate until the combined effects of glitch and deletion make the tweets unreadable, and the user must abandon the platform, as Eos abandoned her senseless, babbling lover. Side note that we do not generally endorse abandonment as an elder care practice. So a user who is scrolling on the platform will at first have fresh content, then notice how the text starts to wrinkle. As they scroll onward and onward, the wrinkles deepen, and then the letters are blotted out until finally the content is unreadable and unreconstructible. We refuse the relations imposed by the extractive platform, that it gets to dictate the terms on which we use the service, that it gets to build in dark design patterns to capture our data, and contest extraction by sabotaging the infinite scroll mechanism. We spoil the curated UI, showing that its design is not inevitable, and move the user through multiple stages to reposition the user and the platform. So in reorienting interventions for social media overuse, we call upon you to reject the narrative of personal responsibility and see these issues as emerging from larger systems. Seek inspiration from historic practices. There is so much to build upon, and it's certainly not limited to Greek myth. And for activists, I know it's easy to dismiss this sort of thing as silly. It can be jarring to discuss serious political issues in lighthearted terms. But in between protests and strikes, the major events of collective resistance, everyday resistance practices sustain us in our struggle, give us a reprieve from the extractive demands of capitalism, or space to think about how things could be different, even though alone everyday resistance is unlikely to produce revolution. Ultimately, to negotiate new relations, work out just structures, and build the future, we will need collective movements. Thank you for your time and attention, and farewell, friends.